Hey all, my name is Michael Richardson, Chapter Director here at Startup Grind Birmingham, and I'd like to welcome you to our second event, which, as you should know by now, is all about finding and securing capital for your business. Before we dive in there, let me give you a little more background on Startup Grind. Launched in 2010, Startup Grind is the largest global community for startups, founders, innovators, and creators. We bring like-minded yet diverse individuals together to connect, learn, teach, help, build, and belong. We stand on three core values: give first, make friends, not contacts, and help others before yourself. In addition to chapter membership, there's also a startup membership, which is free for accepted startups and gives access to exposure and direct introduction opportunities to top investors and our partners. Free access to the Startup Summit taking place in 2021, virtually, of course. And members only partner perks up to $115,000 in value upon sign up, and a whole lot more. We're also looking for chapter sponsors. So if your brand or company wants to support events like this one and some other dope activations, I'd love to have that conversation. I'll drop links for all of this in the chat for those who want to check out and learn more. Back to the topic at hand. We've got a great group of panelists ready to share their insights and wisdom to help you get the support you need to be successful with your business. They include Pierre Laguerre, founder and CEO of Fleeting, and the first African-American male to raise $1 million through equity crowdfunding. Heather Buffo, Venture Growth and Partnerships Lead at Republic, Rachel Wilson, Director of Operations at Collab Capital, and Sean Morrison, Director of Strategy Investments at Starfish Accelerator. With that, I'll kick it over to our moderator, Bronze Valley Accelerator Manager, Haley Kendrick.
Thank you all for joining us. It's really great to be here and get to talk to these great panelists today. So thank you for having me. As Michael mentioned, my name is Haley Medved Kendrick. I'd like to invite Rachel and Sean to join me for our first discussion. Great. Well, we're going to get started by having a little bit of an intro from each of you. If you want to get started by telling us a little bit about who you are and then each of the organizations you represent, and then we'll dive in. Sean, why don't you get us started?
Sure. I am. Can you hear me? Okay. Sean Morrison. I am an angel investor, a three-time entrepreneur. These days, I work as a scout for NDVC. I'm also director of strategy and investments for the Starfish Accelerator, which is the first accelerator of its kind dedicated to supporting artists of color.
We're going to hear more about Starfish a little later today. So Rachel, tell us about.
Hi, and thank you so much, Haley, and the rest of the Startup Grind team for having me. Looking forward to this conversation. So I'm Rachel Wilson. I'm the Director of Operations for Collab Capital. Collab Capital is a venture firm focused on a new model that allows for more options for Black founders, allowing them to have more options in the capital readiness that they'll have, as well as connecting them to the right partners to help them grow.
Great. Thank you. Well, let's dive right in more, Rachel, with the way that Collab is different. So Collab's partners have spoken some about the way that Collab isn't a traditional investment firm. So can you talk about the model and the different ways that you support founders?
Yes, of course. Happy to. Collab is really about just giving options. If you look at the venture options that are out there today, the traditional options, they really more focus on, exiting from a business versus really focusing on the growth of that. And that's really what the whole purpose of Collab is about. More often than not, a lot of Black founders, find themselves in capital opportunities that are either not right for them, or they're too risky for banks, or they are too small for venture capital. And so we're focusing on that niche, that group, that gap that is looking for a way to assess whether their business is even ready for traditional venture. And through our model, we're able to focus on that through a profit sharing arrangement, as well as with providing them with a growth partner. By marrying those two things together, you're able to really find a great way for our founders to be able to be supported with the capital that they need. And we really range that, anywhere from $350K in terms of check size up to $1 million of add-on capital, depending on where they are in their business and if they've seen some growth. And other ways that we also help too is we have a side of the house called Collab Studio, which helps with more resources for founders as well too. So pitch decks to our capital readiness prep school program, you name it. So then that's not just about the financial aspects, as that's important as well.
Great. So you mentioned that you may not be focused on traditional exit. Can you speak a little bit about the other outcomes that a founder may have in mind if exit isn't the one that might be a good fit with Collab?
Yeah, so thinking about what the founder wants. So if that's legacy, so they're building for wealth, building for jobs in their community, trying to have something that's sustainable and lives on past them. If that's a focus that they may have, that's one way of thinking about an exit per se for a founder. Another option would be it's a way to assess readiness for venture. So we're not saying that we're the only choice, but if you're trying to assess whether or not, you are in the right market, that you want to get your cost of customer acquisition down, and you're also trying to find the right partners that can help you grow and elevate without having to continue to raise capital, then this would be a great option for you. So then when you're at $10 million, you're in a better point of leverage when you do decide, or if you decide that you want to talk to someone in VC.
Awesome. Well, Sean, let's kick it to you. You have a lot of different things going on, which we'll hear more about, but starting with your role with Indie VC, can you tell me about how you approach supporting founders and what that role looks like for a verified scout?
So, I don't know how many people know this, on average, most VC firms, they depend on a very actual amount of investments that they make to return the fund, right? So it's maybe like one or two of those investments that return the entire fund. Most of them don't make a ton of money. That's just fund economics. And really and truly, all businesses aren't really fit for venture. Some businesses can make, I think much like Rachel mentioned, you can make millions of dollars per year, you can turn a profit, you can employ people in your communities and be a success, right? And not have a traditional exit, which is either an IPO or a big acquisition. And I think what I've seen and what many of us have seen is a lot of businesses just sort of contorting themselves really to fit into that VC model. And I think that's why we've seen the resurgence of Collab and other firms like Indie, is that people are looking for other options. And so much like what Collab does, Indie it's structured like a traditional VC firm, but there is a unique term sheets, and investments are paid back to the fund as the company moves towards profitability. That's paid back until Indie gets 5x return on their investment. If the company goes on to raise additional funding, then that money turns into equity. But I think, and then obviously there are certain triggers that stimulate those payments back. But it's another option, revenue-based financing for founders, so that they don't have to just hop on the VC track and scale, grow, and end up like everybody else, because it's not a one-size solution. To piggyback on something that Rachel said, I think as well, as we see more non-traditional founders, as we see more founders of color and women, I think that, VC is ripe for disruption. And that's what you're seeing with the rise of firms like Collab and Indie, is that we are sort of shifting things to accommodate these new types of founders that are coming along. And I think that's great disruption. In my role as a scout for Indy. So I started out as one of the original scouts, and that was basically finding companies that fit the mold that then go through the application process. As a verified scout, we are now provided with a certain pool of money that we can actually invest in companies as well. So I've not yet deployed any funds, but I'm certainly on the lookout for companies that fit the mold, in addition to my own angel investing that I do as well.
Excellent. So y'all have both spoken some to this with both the optionality and the different type of outcomes, but could you maybe give some examples of what makes this model attractive to a founder, and maybe an example of a founder who has taken this option and why they chose that route rather than traditional VC?
Well, I think that if we're talking about underrepresented founders, and we're talking about things like closing the wealth gap, and we're talking about things like generational wealth, this is a very viable option, because you're also talking about longevity. And if you're looking at the traditional VC model, you're talking maybe 10 years before it's either a sale or an acquisition or an IPO. And I think for us, especially, we hear the stories, the success stories, but you also don't hear about the stories where you raise $50 million and then there's an exit and your founders still walk away with little to nothing. And so I think it's important to provide different types of options for different types of founders. So I think for founders, this is certainly a viable option, and particularly for non-traditional and underrepresented founders.
Piggyback off of what Sean said, I mean, she said it, perfectly in terms of the financial aspect. From a social aspect, being able to find a core group that understands what it is to build a business, exit out of a business, been through the merry-go-round that is VC, and to be Black, that in itself is very helpful for founders. And that's what we have seen, definitely, the conversations I've had with those that we've been scouting, those that have applied for capital, and those that we have invested in. So you asked about an example. A really great example is our first investment, which was Hairbrella. Tracy Pickett is an amazing founder. She did the legwork to build her business to where it is. And when she was determining whether she should expand her cap table through either venture capital or through our model, one of her biggest things was, I looked at what was out there in Silicon Valley, and I didn't really see anyone who really understood me and what I culturally need to really understand what it means to be invested in. And traditionally, I'm one of the first people in my family to really build this business. And so if the more ownership that I can have in my company and be able to scale this, into other things and provide jobs in my community, that's really what's most important for me. So that's a really great example of someone who is in an underrepresented group and saw the financial benefit for themselves and what they want to do for their own personal and professional goals. And then, how that fit into what they needed for their business, overall.
Like a key piece of this flexibility around equity. And so, would one of you be willing to share the contrast between, if someone's not familiar, the traditional equity stake that a traditional VC might take, and how that impacts the founder's ownership of the company, and then the difference between what each of your organizations do?
Well, I think traditionally the first money in, whether sometimes it's seed, you're looking at losing a good 20% of your company with traditional venture, and then that increases as you take on more funding. And I think for a lot of funders, if they don't understand dilution and VC math, a lot of that comes as a significant surprise. I think the difference, I think for for Indy, I don't know what the exact number is, but it is nowhere close to that. But also the ability to be able to pay it back and regain a percentage of your company that you've initially given up, I think is a huge part of the value add. The other part is that they are invested in you being profitable as a company. And as we often know with venture, I mean, please, you've got companies that are going public that have never turned a profit at all. So it's just kind of like it's miles apart. But I think, you know, it works for some founders. If that is the track you want to go on, I think it's important to understand the economics behind venture. But if you're really focused on profitability, then I think some sort of a different option like indie or collab would be something to consider.
Absolutely. I think both of you may have mentioned the hamster wheel of fundraising, and so the opportunity not to have to continue to raise at the expense of revenue. If that is a priority for you, then that is a wonderful option to have. So thinking about the founder side, or I guess your approach to the founders, as you're evaluating founders and companies, what are you looking for? You mentioned, Rachel, some of the typical raise sizes, but is there a stage of company or an average check size? What makes a founder and a company attractive to you?
So for us, we have some minimal things, obviously, because we're focusing on specifically Black founders, you know, because we find that there is a lot of opportunity there, underrepresented group, and massive amounts of opportunity from investment. So that is our focus. So you do need to have at least, 50% or more ownership of your company of a Black founder. Outside of that, we're kind of industry agnostic, I would say. So we're not really looking for a specific thing, but I would say anything that is too long of a sales cycle or a really long regulatory cycle for investment before we can see profit, that will be challenging. And then we also look for a way where we can be helpful, because our model, like I said, is based off of profit sharing. So we take a profit on the bottom line versus the top line. Revenue is, something comes in, automatically you're giving something, away, a piece of the income that's coming in. Whereas on us, we're waiting a couple of years or so to see that there is some level of profit, and then certain things trigger for us to then take away profit after expenses have. So we look at it from that perspective. So our check sizes too is anywhere from $350 up to $500K initially, and then we have follow-on of $1 million or more, depending on where the company has landed. We're really looking for innovative companies, people who have some great ownership. Maybe there's a patent there. The customer base that they are looking at has some really great opportunity to expound. And we also have what we call our profit sharing calculator. So this is a way for us to be able to help the founder assess whether or not they're ready for our type of model, and if they've thought through these things about their company just in general. And then after that, we kind of take a look to see if they have a pathway to profitability. If they can reach at least $10 million or more, then that to us says, okay, this could be something. And it may not always be the sexiest business out there, because again, this is about profitability and then showcasing that just like Black people aren't a monolith, the ideas and businesses that we create are the same too. So it doesn't have to be focused on one particular industry. And so once they go through all of that, that's where we start to say, okay, this might make a little sense. And then another big pillar is, how can we be helpful? So a part of our model, outside of the profit sharing, we also provide founders with what we call a growth partner. And that's someone who has amazing reach in their industry, in their social networks, the ability to talk to decision makers, whether it be in corporate America, whether that is the clout to reach across people in their social media or consumers, and whether that be a limited partner that we have or a relationship with a limited partner or someone that just happens to be in the network. And if we feel that we really have that person who can really help with reducing customer acquisition costs and being able to help exponentially grow the company, then we align them with that person. So if we really feel that we have that in pocket and this company has the pathway to profitability past 10 million, then that is really the sweet spot, for us.
Is there anything you would add? And I'll throw in the additional perspective on that. Now that you're a verified scout and thinking about where you're going to deploy that capital, what's on your mind in terms of what you're looking for?
A lot of the exact same things apply. For me personally, though, I'm looking for a little, probably less traction and less revenue, but certainly the path to profitability is something that's key. So I won't repeat what Rachel already said quite eloquently, but I just add that.
Well, we will talk to you both again later on in the evening when we rejoin for the panel Q&A, and Sean, when you're sharing more about Starfish. So with that, thank you for this insight. It has been really informative. And with that, I would like to invite Heather and Pierre to join me. And we're going to make a little switch and talk more about the equity crowdfunding options. Hello again.
Hi.
And I think Pierre will be popping up here in a moment. While we're looking for him to pop up, Heather, will you share a little bit about what you do and where you're coming from?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Austin, Texas. I am the Venture Growth and Partnerships Lead at Republic, which is a crowd investment platform for anyone and everyone to invest in private companies. That company is based in New York, but I am based here, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, I know that I just recently learned about the new equity. I guess it's not that new, but it was new to me, equity crowdfunding regulation. So tell us a little bit more about what is regulated in equity crowdfunding. How is that different than what many people may first think of when they hear crowdfunding?
For sure. So when people talk about crowdfunding, they're usually talking about a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo. Those are your kind of traditional crowdfunding platforms. So there's a business raising money, and they might be kind of early stage, working on a demo perhaps. And if you're all about what they're doing, you can give them some money and maybe you'll get some swag or an early product or something in return, but the relationship kind of ends there. Republic is a crowd investment platform. So we see ourselves as the marriage between crowdfunding and angel investing. So we were founded in 2016 as a spin out of AngelList when Title III of the Jobs Act passed. And what Title III said was basically that anybody, not just people who are super wealthy, could invest in private companies. Originally, the SEC, was founded in order to protect investors from bad investments and companies that were, claiming we're going to grow $1 bajillion and you're going to get a huge payout, but then not following through on that promise. So the SEC regulates companies for that very reason. And in 2016, from 1933 to 2016, only the very wealthy could invest in private companies. But now you, me, anybody who's listening can invest with as little as $10. So on Republic, we have helped now over 250 companies raise more than $150 million in capital through this rule. So it's been a really fun ride. We've grown really quickly. But to get back to your original question, the main difference between crowdfunding and investing. In crowd investing, you are actually buying into a piece of the company and investing in that company long term. So you'll get a return on your investment when there is an exit or another liquidation event like an acquisition or an IPO.
Excellent. So for the founders, tell me a little bit about what this new regulation means for founders.
Yeah, so while Title III passed in 2016, there were actually some really exciting updates that came out from the SEC just a month ago today, actually, which we're very, very excited about. So like I said, the SEC originally created a lot of these regulations and laws in order to protect investors. And so when they expanded that definition, they expanded it very, very slightly, but they've loosened the reins a little bit this time to create some more opportunities. So there were a lot of changes, but there are two that are really relevant here and really exciting to us. The first one is the increase in the cap. So as of now, if you are doing an equity crowdfunding raise on Republic, you can only raise up to $1,070,000 in one 12-month rolling period. Starting in 2021, that cap is going up to $5 million. So that is really exciting for a couple of reasons. One being that, you know, a lot of, we generally are in the like pre-seed to Series A, with the seed stage being our sweet spot. But a lot of companies, even at seed stage, are trying to raise more than $1 million. You know, sounds like a lot of money, but for running a company, it's not necessarily. So it'll really allow companies to be able to raise more money if they need it for that round. And it'll also hopefully be able to allow us to support later stage companies that might be Series B or a little bit further along and are looking to, again, raise a larger round. The other update that is very exciting is about testing the waters. So you may know that when a company is doing a fundraise, they're like announcing to people that they're fundraising. For equity crowdfunding, you are not allowed to test the waters right now. So the goal of that is to not, make false promises to people. But it also means that founders can't really figure out if a crowdfunding campaign would be worth their time if they can't, investigate who might actually be interested in this offering. So starting in 2021, they will be allowed to test the waters and hopefully, get some of that information ahead of time. This rule in particular is especially beneficial for underrepresented founders and founders who may not have the network around them with people with deep pockets who can just like give them money to do their friends and family round and start investing right away. So it's a really important update, and we're really excited to help founders be able to do this. And so they can drum up interest. They can, talk to their customers, talk to their friends, let them know that this investment opportunity is coming, soft circle some investments, and then hopefully, as soon as they launch their campaign, they can just send it to those investors and they can immediately secure those funds. So those are two of the major updates that we're really excited about, and hopefully a lot of people take advantage of it.
Awesome. Pierre looks to be hopping in. So one more question for you in the meantime. You have both founders and investors kind of as pools on either side of the pipeline. How do you support these stakeholders?
Yeah, so we have a lot of resources for founders and investors. So starting with investors, there are a ton of educational resources on our website. So like I said before, Republic is kind of a cross between crowdfunding and angel investing. So if you're an angel investor or you're looking to be an angel investor is just a person with some money who can make an individual investment, right? So an angel investor does not necessarily mean you have to have $50,000. You can go on Republic, invest with $100, and start building your portfolio of companies. We work really hard to curate our platform and vet companies and do rigorous due diligence to make sure that we are offering really high quality deals to our investors. So investors can go on our website, they can learn about investing in general and then in private investing specifically. My colleague Cheryl Campos this spring also ran an angel investing masterclass, which is on our YouTube channel. I'll send the link here in the chat. So if you go there, you'll be able to get a little more information about angel investing. for founders, Pierre could probably speak better to this since he is one of our amazing founders who reached that $1,070,000 cap this year, which is so impressive. But in terms of general things that we do for founders, we try to support founders as best we can before, during, and after the campaign process. So before the campaign, we walk them through the process, launching, filing the Form C with the SEC, doing all the legal riffraff. That's, a big headache and a time suck. But, we try to make it as painless and fast as possible so that they can, just get the money in their pockets. And then once they start the campaign, we kick in some additional marketing for them. So we ask that founders raise the first 25K. Hi, Pierre. From their community that already exists before they start their campaign. So friends and family, other users or customers that they already have, give them a chance to have a stake. Once they reach that 25K minimum, we kick in some additional marketing. So paid Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram ads, and newsletters to our subscriber base, which right now has over 800,000 people on it. So we do our best to make sure that we are supporting the campaign, making sure that they reach the goal that they're looking for with, as little effort on the founder part as possible.
Well, Pierre, I'm interested to hear from you. You've gone down this path before. You chose to use this route for your fundraise instead of the traditional round. Why did you take that approach?
But for me, I think the reason why we did crowdfunding, right? There's several reasons why we did it, because as we understand, we're building a platform in transportation logistics, and we want to give truck drivers a better way of life, right? And what I did, I look at other companies in the same logistics space. I didn't see any one of them offering any perks to the drivers that they quote unquote call that they're serving. So I said, for us, Readiness, if we say that we are driver centric, we want to build something that actually improves driver life, at least give them upward mobility. I said it would make sense to have drivers invested into this platform because my success depends on the drivers, right? So I said, well, we don't want to build a mega company and just use drivers to make the money and the drivers don't reap no benefits out of it at the end. So for me, it was much more like, okay, how can I get the drivers involved? So that's why it made the perfect sense to go towards the crowdfunding, because the check size that we know we wanted, unfortunately, truck drivers cannot write us the check size, right? So only through crowdfunding, we know that drivers will actually be able to put $100, $200, or maybe $1,000. So that's why we went towards the crowdfunding. We wanted to give truck drivers or some customers that love what we were doing, but typically didn't have the VC status or couldn't write the big check size. So we wanted them to participate because they're already our champion. So it really worked out great by doing the crowdfunding because a lot of drivers was able to invest to the crowdfunding as well. So that's why we did it that way.
I love that. Heather, do you see other companies using it as a way to give ownership to their employees or their customers, that kind of how Pierre approached it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the, primary kind of selling points, I think, to founders and also to customers. When you are a new company, like, your most important resource are your customers. Your customers are the people that are the reason you exist. So if they're already like really hype about what you're doing and feeling like really supportive of you and your mission, why not give them a stake in the company? So that's why the minimum 25K is actually, I'm pretty sure most all, except for, with a few small exceptions, of companies have been able to reach that 25K minimum, because the first people that want to invest in your company are the people that are already using your services or buying your products, and are excited about what you're doing and want to support you going forward. So, and we love to, be able to offer that opportunity as well, because, there are some companies where you might be like, I love this company. Like, I know those brands for me, where I'm so brand loyal, and that's not historically a thing that I would have said about myself. But, when I see someone doing something that I believe in and is working towards a mission to make the world look like the way I want to see it look, then I want to be a part of that. So it's a huge bonus for founders and for customers.
I have had the same experience where I was never a person that considered myself brand loyal, but now I'm like, okay, I know I want to support this company. I'm not an angel level investor. So I love that there's this opportunity for, on the investor side or the average Joe side, to get involved and support those companies. So Pierre, say I was a brave entrepreneur like you, which I am not, and I was thinking about considering this route. What tips would you have for me approaching the campaign and preparing for a raise through this crowdfunding platform?
Oh yeah, I mean, one thing I can say definitely, I'm pretty sure you have friends and family, right? As Heather was talking about, the first 25K is very important to get to that first 25K. I think we was able to reach that 25K within a couple of days, and I think I did great at really promoting our own company, right? I did a lot of pitch competitions, speak to a lot of other founders, and also on social media, I do have I got a great following that really was interested into what we were building, and I'm always talking about the pain point in logistics. So I think for you is focus on the problem that you're really solving and show how the problem can affect the entire country. Show that there's a real solution to it. And there's not only that you're bringing the solution, but there's also some money can be made while bringing that solution to market. So if you can take that approach and show the investors and show your audience that you're the right person to build this, you have the experience, you have the passion to do it, I think you'll have a successful campaign.
That's so true, Pierre. I think that's my favorite thing about founders. I mean, they're solving problems. They see problems, they have an idea for a solution, and then they're just trying to bring it to the world and bring it to fruition. So I totally agree.
Well, if I go down that route, I'm going to take Pierre's advice because it seems like you've been really successful and really know how to sell it. So great job. I'm looking forward to hearing more from both of you in our Q&A. If anyone has questions, please drop it in the chat. We're going to have a few minutes to get to that in just a few. So thank you so much, Heather and Pierre. I'm going to invite Sean back to the stage to tell us a little bit more about some of the other things that she is working on. Welcome back.
Hey there.
Well, we teased it a little bit earlier, but in addition to NDVC, you've got some cool other things going on. So Starfish Accelerator and your role as the Director of Strategy and Investments. Tell us how you work with founders. What's your approach? You mentioned a little earlier that it's a non-traditional accelerator. So tell us more.
Yeah, so Starfish is not a traditional accelerator. We definitely took the model from accelerators like Techstars and YC, but we don't support founders per se. We support mid-career artists of color. And we are rooted in four key pillars: radical ownership, authenticity, transparency, and community. And so I don't know how many people are familiar with I May Destroy You. It's a show that's on HBO by Michaela Cole, but there was a story that came out recently about in the negotiations for I May Destroy You, get that on the air, Netflix offered her $1 million. Well, along with that $1 million, she would have no rights to the work, to the IP, the work that basically she created that's based on her personal experience that she wrote, that she directed. She would lose all control of that. And then more recently, there was an incident, I think, with Dave Chappelle, where he mentioned that the Chappelle Show was being shown on Netflix and I think some other channels, but that he wasn't getting any revenue. And he actually did a piece where he talked about signing the contract and basically signing over his IP to the tune of where Viacom was able to license that in perpetuity to anyone, including Netflix, with him having A, no say in the matter, and B, no revenue. And so Starfish exists in the world so that things like that don't happen to creatives of color. We believe that creatives of color represent the single greatest opportunity to address some of the social ills that we find ourselves in as a society today. And these artists are taking on some of the major issues with big and bold and audacious ideas. And so what we've done is we've modeled ourselves on tech accelerators. We provide a framework and support for these artists by building a community that we call a creative village around them to assist them with their pieces. And so once they create their pieces and we get them out into the world, the other thing I should mention is that we provide financial support. So we provide, we just finished we're in the middle of our first cohort right now. We provide them with $50,000, but unlike traditional accelerators, we do not take any equity at all. It is free and clear. Like we said, it's really about authenticity and transparency and getting these creators to create good work. Where my role as director of strategy and investment comes in is after these pieces are done, we would like to have the opportunity then to make an investment, a follow-on investment, if you will, in those pieces of IP. And sort of that's where my role as the director of strategy and investments comes in. So we are an accelerator, but we don't, our cohorts don't consist of founders.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of examples around film or TV talent. I imagine you work with all type of artists, from musicians to visual artists. Can you tell me a little bit about the type of artists that you work with?
Yeah, so we don't have any musicians in the current cohort. We have someone who's working on a podcast. We've got someone who just completed a visual poem called "Laying Flowers, Setting Fires." A beautiful. I'll include the link later on. And we've got someone working on a graphic novel as well. So we don't have any musicians yet, but the idea is that these different types of IPs can be spun off into different things, right? So you can start with a podcast that can then turn into a television show or a film or a graphic novel or something else. And so the idea is to really sort of work with these artists to create that initial piece of IP and own as much of it as possible before it gets spun off, because Hollywood it's a machine, right? So it's important to protect artists and the work that they create. It's really the only way for them to make an income, right? So if you don't own that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got another question, which I might pitch you as we're inviting the other panelists back up to the stage for Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, please drop them in. And if the other panelists will please join me again. While they're doing that, Sean, the accreditor investor roles have changed, as they tend to do recently. And I'm curious how this impacts specifically the space that Starfish is in, and if there are different implications for investors when it comes to creatives and some of these folks that you may not be traditionally thinking of as a startup founder, but what does that look like on the investment side, maybe at the stage where you are afterward thinking about the follow-on investment?
Yeah, it doesn't really, I mean, I think these rules around the accredited investors are really for traditional investors, and I could be wrong, but I don't think it has as big of an impact for us at Starfish. But as I take my Starfish hat off and put my angel in, I think, that there's more of an impact there. And I think that the rules have sort of shifted in terms of what an accredited investor looks like. I think that it's a step in the right direction, but I don't think it's enough. And particularly when we're talking about underrepresented communities, I think that I understand why those rules are in place, and I understand that they're a part of a legacy system, but I think that they wind up today, particularly when more people are from underrepresented communities are looking to move into the investing space, they wind up being a little more exclusionary than inclusive. I think that what could help that is a little or a lot more education around investing, as opposed to just hard and fast rules around, income and that kind of stuff. I think that, it's a little dog whistly to me to say you have to make this amount of money and then you are allowed to invest, right? So I think that I'm pleased that it's been relaxed a little bit, but I still think there's a long way to go to make it a lot more inclusive for everyone.
I'll bring Heather and Rachel back in as well, and Pierre, if you have any thoughts, thinking on a fund or an LP or investor side, what do platforms like each of the ones you represent mean for that? I think Sean just gave a really good point about the inclusivity of allowing more people to be involved. Do any of you have any other thoughts on maybe a fund or LP, how this might change how they approach investing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely jump in there. I think for collab, that also is a differentiator as well. Just because we understand that there are folks in our community that are high net worth individuals that have a sense of fear when it comes to investing. And so, like I like to say, sometimes we'll go out to Pookie and them and say, oh, they got a a franchise or something that I want to be a part of, but they're not thinking about some of these other opportunities that have higher ROIs, may be less risky, have a little bit more traction, but because of not understanding and not being educated in that way, they tend to do certain things, especially if you're talking to folks that are coming from certain places. If their lifestyle or background is more in athletics or music, or even those in corporate America, and they're just used to certain things. So what Collab has really done is trying to make sure that there is a level of education there when it comes to the tech space of that and the history of venture capital, coming all the way from the vanguard groups and whatnot, and how that has transitioned to what we see today, because it's not really that old of an industry, and trying to break that down for them. And then also carrying that through how we allow them to invest into our fund. So with Collab, I would say most funds, what we've seen traditionally is there's a large check, just like John was saying, you got to make this much, you got to put this much in. But we understand that we want to have LPs at the table who can provide access to their networks and their experience. So in order to do that, we also have to compromise and be understanding of their challenges when it comes to this. So initially, there is an investment of $100K if you are a accredited investor into our fund, but we allow them to do that over time. So they're initially only paying like $20,000 if they only do the minimum, and then they pay that over time over 6 periods until they meet the full 100K. And this is really helpful for people to plan out when they make their investments. This is also helpful for those who may be a musician that has a gig coming up and it's like, okay, I'm gonna make $50,000 on this next thing, so I can plan to make sure that I allot that to this fund. If you're a corporate American, you have a 401k or you're getting bonuses, this is a way for you to plan out that as well. So we're taking that into account as we're looking at investors and diversifying who's a part of the fund, not only because of their understanding of how funds work, but their finances, as well as making sure that we have expertise and experiences coming from different places.
Well, I have a question I'd love all of you to answer. I'll start with Pierre. But what is one thing that you think founders need to know about a resource or a tool? What's that one thing, starting with you, the founder?
Wait, what was that again? You said, what is it that we should know, founders?
Yeah, what is something you want other founders to know about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The legal aspect of running a startup and fundraising is very important. It's crucially important. I mean, that's very important. Understanding your cap table, that's very important. Understanding the equity that you're giving out to team members, to investors, those things are very important, because yes, it could be peaches and cream in the beginning, but it could be a big regret later on. So I think it's very important that founders take the time to truly educate themselves and understanding the cap table, understand how to properly communicate with investors. Not only that, but definitely learn how to negotiate with investors, because it is your business. Yes, I understand the investors have the funds to give to your business. Too often, founders or minorities founders, we always feel like we at the disadvantage when we speak to VCs. They kind of feel like we're speaking with our hand out and we don't feel valuable what we bring to the table. So my message to founders would be, hey, be confident, understand that you're the product. You're the one that's actually building it. You're the founder. You're the one with the vision. Don't let anyone sell you short. Just understand what you're building and be passionate and be confident in what you're doing and control the narrative. That's what I would say.
Excellent. Sean, what is something or a resource that founders should know?
I'm just going to applaud Pierre on stating it so eloquently. I think I touched on it earlier, but definitely know the ins and outs, particularly when you're talking to investors, whether it's VC or whether you're crowdfunding. Really sort of understand the business end of things. And in terms of a resource, there's a product that Indy does called Intro, and basically what it does is it matches founders with different types of funding options. So aside from VC, whether it's a loan or however you'd like to approach getting funds for your startup, I think it's a great resource for alternative means of funding. And I can type the URL into the chat if I think it's intro.me. And if you do / Sean Morrison, it'll say that I recommended you. So I'll add it to the chat so that people can get that. But I think it's a great resource.
Thank you. Rachel, what about you?
I mean, Pierre said it best, have your house in order. That's how I would say it. It's really, really important to do that. I would also say that if you're at the point where you're trying to figure out what your best capital options are, a lot of people try to focus on pitching to investors. I say you need to pivot that and try to figure out how do you pitch to your customers. Try to figure out how you're making money. Try to figure out how you can sustain the business, where you are first, paying the bills, trying to do that first. And then from there, everything else will follow. But if you're coming from, not have put anything out to market, you haven't priced anything out, you haven't really tested anything, talked to any customers, or really not enough, or tried anything with your product or service, then you're doing yourself a disservice by not doing that. So I would say definitely get the house in order, and definitely pivot your pitch to your customers first.
Heather,
I don't know how to follow that. I mean, I think they I guess just to continue to build on that theme, I would say do your due diligence on your investors. Know exactly what it is that you want to get out of every investment that you're seeking. Are you looking for someone who's going to be hands-on and an advisor and a champion, or are you just looking for capital? You want to do equity crowdfunding. Where does that fit into your broader pipeline of fundraising? You need to really be intentional about all of the funds that you're seeking, and understand what you're going to get yourself into and what you're going to get out of it. And, be ready to say yes or no, depending on what the offering ends up being. But it's really a two-way street, and there's no reason, venture capitalists, all kinds of investors, they do their due diligence on your business. There's no reason that you shouldn't do your due diligence on their business and their character as well. In terms of just a logistical resource, this was shared with me recently that I like. I'll send it in the chat. It's called Tech for Black Founders, and it's a list of companies that are, oops, I think I copied it badly. It's a list of resources of companies that want to offer free or discounted technology tools to Black founders. So it's a long Notion document. There's a lot of different companies on there, so check that out. And there are lots of different cool resources on Notion, and that people write about on Medium as well. So those are places that I like to go.
Awesome. Well, 1 minute before we go to breakout rooms and have more time for discussion, any final words of wisdom you would leave with the group? I'll open that up. Or stand-up jokes, Rachel.
No, I would love to hear more from Pierre. I love to hear from founders, and I love what he's building at Fleeting. So, love for him to share some words of wisdom.
Well, one word of wisdom I live by myself, and I think every founder should understand that is best thing ever invented to mankind is another 24 hours, right? And what I mean by that is, with another 24 hours, we can change our reality, we can change our perception, we can change our surroundings. So, building the business is not going to be easy, especially a startup. Raising venture capital, to me, I think is one of the most brutal things that I've done myself, right?
It's 17 hours.
Simply because, when you're raising, you're speaking to 100 VCs and you get 100 no's. Somehow, some way that chip into your confidence. And I just want founders to understand, man, don't let down, don't let up. That's part of the game. You're gonna get the no's, and just truly just be yourself and understand that we have that another 24 hours. We can change things, we can shift things. We are powerful, we have it, because I don't think anybody can just wake up with a vision and say, I'm going to do this. Because the thing is, a lot of people wake up and say, I'm going to do this, but how many people actually execute, right? How many people actually take the time to go to market? So if you're in a if you're in a race already, raising venture capital, you have a little bit of traction. Trust me, you're doing better than most. So really, it's important to understand how, 24 hours, I really truly live by it myself. I almost lost my life 2 years ago. So I know when I say that best thing ever invented to mankind is another 24 hours, that's coming from God. And I understand that, regardless of how many VCs tell me no, I always look at it that, okay, well, I'm building something that I've been part of for 17 years. My divorce was because I was in that industry. And I know millions of drivers going through it. So that's how I want founders to understand their product. I want them to understand their business in that sense, the way, regardless of how many no's they get, you just got to brush it off your shoulder and keep pushing.